Psalm 91. He who dwells in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. I will say of the Lord, He is my refuge and my fortress. My God, in Him I will trust. Surely He shall deliver you from the snare of the fowler and from the perilous pestilence. He shall cover you with His feathers, and under His wings you shall take refuge. His truth shall be your shield and buckler. You shall not be afraid of the terror by night, nor of the arrow that flies by day, nor of the pestilence that walks in darkness, nor of the destruction that lays waste at noonday. 1,000 may fall at your side, and 10,000 at your right hand, but it shall not come near you. Only with your eyes shall you look and see the reward of the wicked. Because you have made the Lord, who is my refuge, even the Most High, your dwelling place. No evil shall befall you, nor shall any plague come near you, your dwelling. For He shall give His angels charge over you, to keep you in all your ways. In their hands they shall bear you up, lest you dash your foot against a stone. You shall tread upon the lion and the cobra, the young lion and the serpent you shall trample underfoot. Because He has set His love upon me, therefore I will deliver him. I will set him on high, because he has known my name. He shall call upon me, and I will answer him. I will be with him in trouble. I will deliver him and honor him. With long life I will satisfy him and show him my salvation.
Hi, I'm Roger Stone, and you're watching His Glory TV.
And we want to welcome all of His Glory Nation from east to west to north to south. Welcome to today's Take 5. We have a Constitution Roundtable today with Derek Johnson, Chris Ann Hall, and Joe Bannister. This is like perfect timing to talk about Constitution, what's going on in the streets of the United States potentially tomorrow, and other constitutional issues that are coming against President Trump. So we will get their expert opinion on the Constitution and the days we live in. Perfect timing. God's timing is always spot on. All right, before we bring in our guest, first is Kingdom Energy. We need energy. Our bodies are temple of the Most High God. These are packets that you can take with you. I like putting mine in the hydrogen water so you get the best of both worlds. But you look at this compared to the next slide. How Kingdom Energy versus Red Bull, Monster, Rockstar. Dr. Sherwood says they literally have formaldehyde in them, and look at all the sugar and carbs and all that junk in there. So you can use Kingdom Energy, and you get good stuff. Our bodies are temples. From north to south, the east to the west of all your property, there's Bible verses on there. Mama's Glory is giving you to pray over your land, your house. The prayer shawl from Israel is to get intimate in your prayer with the Lord. The shofar to go far, as Clay Clark calls it. Those are authentic ram's horn from Jerusalem. The enemy does not like blowing of the shofar and the anointing oil. This literally comes from the fields of Boaz and King David when he was a boy, and that's from Bethlehem, the Lion of Judah. So you can get all those and take authority in the name of Christ of all your property and your land. General tithing, your faithful tithing supports communities and spreads hope nationwide and abroad. Partner with us to make a lasting difference in countless lives. Head to hisglory.me. Donate. Impact the world for Christ. Help us get to 1 billion souls. We are going into the 1 billion soul harvest. What a great time to be alive. All right, those are all the announcements. It's time for Derek Johnson, Chris Ann Hall, and Joe Bannister. Welcome guests. This is going to be very, very fun. Why don't we start with all three of you? Just kind of quick, brief background if people don't know your backgrounds. I think that's the best way.
Well, obviously you can tell I grew up in Vermont, probably, with this big Vermont accent, but no, I was born in Alabama. Grew up in a traditional Southern family, Christian values, things of that nature, Southern values as well. I went to the University of Alabama as my undergrad. I did my master's at Colorado State University with my GI Bill, and I'm actually have someone knocking on the door at the hotel right now, so I'm getting interrupted. But you're gonna have to wait real quick. We have to go to one of them. I might have to tell them to.
We'll go to Chris Ann Hall next. All right, Chris Ann.
Well, I am currently a constitutional attorney. I also, because I'm a sole practitioner, I also do a lot of other things, contracts. I love doing contracts, which I think actually lines up with my constitutional studies. Since the Constitution is a contract, it really is my passion. I started off as a biochemist. I went into the military. I was a cryptologic linguist, Russian linguist for the U.S. military intelligence. I then went to law school when I got out of the military and started off as a prosecutor. The only job I really wanted to do, I'm very passionate. I'm really a sheepdog kind of person. I am a defender of rights. And some people might think, well, why weren't you a public defender? Well, most people don't realize that a prosecutor is the best defense attorney that you can have, because no one even has charges filed against them unless the prosecutor says so. So I really approached my role as a prosecutor from what is the most sound prosecution. I battled with other prosecutors in my field who were a win at all cost kind of thing. And I always trained the attorneys under me. This is not about wins and losses. This is about people's lives. And we must be secure in the rights of the people, because if we aren't secure in the rights of the people, then our rights ourselves are not secure. And I think the Lord just took that as a seed and launched me into constitutional studies. And whenever you have a tendency to accept a call on your life, God seems to want to take you to levels you never have ever anticipated. And I began teaching the Constitution and writing on my own time as a prosecutor. And my boss, who in the state of Florida is an elected official, decided that he didn't like what I was teaching and didn't like who I was teaching. And so he gave me an ultimatum and said that it was that the fact that I was teaching the Constitution meant that the government was limited. It's an authority. He said that was an ethical conflict of interest for me because I worked for the government. So apparently you can't believe in limited government if you work for government. And he said that I had to cease and desist any association with groups he didn't approve of. And my husband was pastoring a church at the time, and my income was what was supporting the family. It was a brand new church. And he told me that I had to cease and desist or I had to resign. I was put in an internal conflict because I didn't know how we would manage if I didn't have a job. And my husband and I prayed about it.
We're going to go to Joe while that's froze up. Joe, why don't you give us your background?
Thanks, Pastor Dave. So I'm a former IRS special agent, and the special part is that the IRS, back when I was there, about 3,000 criminal investigators. So I was, gunning a badge for the IRS for 5.5 years. I expected to be there for a full 20-year career. But Chris Ann's description of her challenges, I very much understand that. Same kind of a thing. I took an oath to support and defend the Constitution. And when I recognized that the IRS was lying to the public about the federal income tax, I started to, approach my supervisors at the IRS and say, hey, we all took the same oath to support and defend the Constitution. Looks like there's some issues here. We need to get them resolved. And instead of working together to resolve them and abiding by our oaths, the IRS told me to hit the road and resign. So I was a CPA for 15 years and resigned 26 years ago from the IRS. So I just continued to let the public know that the IRS is lying to them about their income tax obligations and, trying to keep freedom as alive as possible in our country.
Well, excellent. Well, thank you. It's all three of you have your own God stories. So let's we talk about President Trump and the Constitution. But before, I know we got two questions that we were talking about as executive orders. I'm curious about tomorrow. Let's talk about constitutionally. If things go crazy in the United States of America, what constitutional things can President Trump do with our military? Anybody want to start with that, Derek?
My thing right now is I'm not knocking anybody else and their opinions, their beliefs, but when it comes to military, we're already under martial law. We've been under martial law. We've been there. That's when it comes to people not knowing military laws, which military laws are separate. There's 4 ways military pairs were federal. That's executive orders, proclamations, treaties, and national emergencies. President Eisenhower established the Presidential Emergency Action Documents, which are a part of a continuity government plan. President Trump invoked the continuity government with Executive Order 13961 on December the 7th, 2020. It was partially revoked on January the 19th, 2025. Why would Biden, if he were real and president, why would he partially revoke that? Why didn't he do that on January the 20th, 2021? So I show people that Biden's not real. You're all watching a military occupation, and it's all by law, but it's all military laws. And then how do you deem what's going on? Joint Publication 3-57, that is your civil and military operations. And it specifically says, this is for all the people out there who thinks that military are being tyrants right now. You got to go look in Joint Publication 3-57. Also know about your PEDS and your continuity government and your military law, which is Title 10 authority, presidential authority. And President Trump just invoked Title 10, Section 12406, which is a National Guard presidential call-up. He invoked the reserve components way back in 2020. That order has not been revoked. So 1 million reserve components are active daily. So it has nothing to do with how old it is. Has it been revoked? So when you take where we are right now, the civil military operations, in that joint publication, it specifically says, no, you don't want, and I'm paraphrasing there, it says generally you don't want the Title 10 authority, which is your Marine Corps and my Army, on the streets of America, generally. But it says unless what? The Constitution deems so and Congress. Congress did that with Title 50, Chapter 33, Section 1550 on December the 20th, 2019. That is your war order right there. That is your Title 50, which is your War and National Defense, and Chapter 33, which is your War Powers Act. And then those executive orders that President Trump invoked, all the military, are in the clause prescribed in Section 1550. So it outlines that we're in a military occupation. And then little things like this for the new audience out there that haven't heard me before. You'll hear President Trump use the terms occupied territory, occupied country, the white flag of surrender, capitulation, all right, puppet government. I'm the only podcaster out there that's been ever talking about puppet governments because my grandpa taught me about them. He was a World War II veteran. Those are all law of war manual terms. They're not government terms. So it shows you we're in a military occupation because guess what? Occupied territory and puppet government are in the chapter of a military occupation. So it shows people where we are. So everything that people are watching right now has already been planned because a presidential emergency action document and your continuity government are invoked. It's pre-planned. They're pre-drafted. So everything is a strategy. So same thing with Iran. All this has been planned.
So, Chrisanne, can you talk about that constitutionally? If this explodes here in the United States about President Trump's authority under the Constitution, Marines are already there. I'm a fellow Marine. They're on the streets. Why would we have Marines, and what constitutionally makes that right?
So I appreciate Derek's perspective. However, if we're going to answer this from a constitutional perspective, then we have to be true to the Constitution and not simply citing law. There are 3 constitutional sections that really actually are supposed to guide and direct in this. So you have Article 1, Section 8, Clause 15, which requires Congress to call forth the militia to execute the laws of the Union to suppress insurrection and repel invasions. You have Article 4, Section 4, which says that the United States shall guarantee to every state in the Union a republican form of government and shall protect each of them against invasion and on application of the legislature or the executive of the state against domestic violence. The third very important section of the Constitution, which is often overlooked because it's so mistaught and so misrepresented, is Article 6, Clause 2, which we technically refer to as the Supremacy Clause. Now, it has been misrepresented and mistaught to mean that federal laws and federal government is supreme to state laws and state constitution whenever they conflict. But that's not what the Supremacy Clause says. It's not what it means and not what it was intended to do. So when you look at a lot of the USC, a lot of the War Powers Act specifically, you have to understand those things are violative of the Constitution on their face. So Article 6, Clause 2 tells us that when a constitution, when a legislative act is inconsistent with the Constitution, it is not binding on the states and is null and void. We have many of our founders during the time of the ratification who actually said that over and over again, verbatim. James Wilson said that it lacks the force of law. James Madison really talked about that a lot. And Alexander Hamilton, the big government guy, actually even said that anything contrary to the Constitution must be invalid. Not only did they establish these principles and the meanings of these principles, they actually went ahead and went forward to warn us if we disregarded that. So the idea that Congress can somehow create a proclamation that puts us in a continual state of warfare is contrary to the Constitution and contrary to the intent of the Constitution, as our founders actually spoke against having this in place. This is what we would classify as a standing army. And so in order for military to be active on the United States, there has to be actually an invasion that is happening, not a domestic disturbance. And I think maybe that's where some of the confusion is. They have these things all in one clause. So everybody's like, well, it's this, this, or this. No, we have three distinct classifications of actions. We have invasion, we have insurrection, and we have domestic violence. This is not an invasion. I mean, I think that we sometimes classify that as an invasion from a layman's terms, but not from a legal constitutional perspective. This is not an insurrection that's happening in California, because an insurrection would be someone in Sacramento trying to overthrow the government seat there. This is very specifically and historically and constitutionally defined as a domestic violence in which the federal government cannot bring troops in without the request of the legislature. And if the legislature can't be convened, then the governor. The question then becomes, so we just let California burn? No, that's not how it's supposed to work. What we're dealing with is a post-constitutional crisis, really, because the people of California were never supposed to allow themselves to be disarmed. Remember, we are a confederation of states where each state is an independent, sovereign country. The federal government was never designed to go in and run the states. The federal government was never even designed to be the defender of the states in all applications. Not only that, the role of the president as the commander-in-chief was also extremely limited constitutionally. And I would suggest that if you're curious about knowing why and how that came to be, you need to read Federalist 69, because the president being very limited in his autonomous power was to keep the president from becoming a king. So here we are in a situation where we as Americans have to really make a choice, kind of like Mr. Joseph did and I did as well. Do we follow the Constitution, or do we allow us to be ruled by emotion? And one of the most important principles that we must understand is that the Constitution was established in writing to establish a standard. It's not a living, breathing document. We don't get to amend it without Article 5. And that's something that the War Powers Act has attempted to do, to take power that was specifically reserved to the legislative branch and transfer it to the president. Contrary to the Constitution, contrary to intent, read Federalist 69. We either remain a people tied to the Constitution and the rule of law, or we choose to be a people that are no longer established under the standard of the Constitution, and we allow to be ruled by emotions of fear. And it's what Benjamin Franklin said: do we trade temporary security for liberty? And that's the choice that America has to make today. California can defend itself. And if the Californian government, those in government, do not want to defend California, then the people must defend themselves. But Derek was absolutely right about the fact that this is planned. This is absolutely orchestrated, and we've seen this throughout history. These are not illegal aliens. Let's just wipe that off the board. These are not illegal aliens that are rioting. These are revolutionary anarchists, violent revolutionary anarchists that have been sprinkled throughout history to create these destabilizations and revolutionary processes. I suggest to you, and maybe Mr. Joseph and Mr. Derek can chime in as well, that this is not just Soros. This is our own CIA, because our own CIA engages in this type of destabilization. Why would they do this? Because the only people who will defend the Constitution, defend the rule of law, and defend America are the very people who put Trump in office. Why didn't they start this destabilization under Biden? Because under Biden's administration, the conservatives and the MAGA people would have been against Biden. He wouldn't have been able to push this through. Now, I'm not saying that Trump is on board with this, but what's happening is there's a lot of emotions and expectations that are set up. And we have to be very careful that we aren't becoming our own worst enemy and crying to leave behind the Constitution for temporary safety so that we become the people that usher in this socialist regime that the plan for this action is trying to usher in. And let us remember, Donald Trump has 3 years left. That's it. Whatever power we allow Donald Trump to exercise today will be exercised by the next president exponentially, and that's how liberty dies.
All right, we'll turn it over to Joe now.
Man, really quick.
Yeah, go ahead, Derek.
I think Mr. Joseph should have his chance first.
All right, we'll go.
That's
we'll go
just so misleading in so many ways. I'm sorry, but I just don't want to be a part of this anymore.
All right, Joe. Why don't we have Joe and Derek? I'll have you come in and come back to that. Joe, go ahead.
Well, I guess I'm learning a lot from both Derek and Chris Ann in terms of the law and Constitution on the military. So I'm more of the, from a federal agent's perspective. Of course, we all have memories of President Trump's first term and how, clearly he was, the media was basically punking President Trump, and egging him on to do something. And he was, apprehensive about doing something. Remember the Chaz and, all of these occupied areas in Seattle and Portland. And thankfully, I don't think President Trump has those same apprehensions, which is great. Seems to me, there's, I don't know how many there are, hundreds of thousands of federal agents, the GS 1811 series, like I used to be. And a lot of them have a financial expertise. And I've always found it very beneficial to follow the money.
Absolutely.
And I think we could.
know that Amazon participates in the censorship of conservatives? Did you know they've pushed trans indoctrination on our children? We're in a war, and I'm asking you to be a part of something greater. I'm asking you to join our kingdom economy. We all need to buy cleaning products, clothes, and food. Why not buy from somebody that loves God? Go to our Kingdom Economy page and make a difference today. Let's defund the cabal and be a kingdom builder. No more money to going into destroying our lives, our children's lives. We need to take it away from them. We need to cut it off and build the kingdom through patriot and Christian organizations. Do you want to give your money to corporations that do not share our value and our God? Or do you want to feed the kingdom that gets this nation back and loves our God and puts our God first? Stand up for what you believe in. Swap where you shop. That's how we win. Fight with your dollars, and light wins. God bless you, and go in his shalom.
So Restore is a product that does what it says it does. It was made to, after you're detoxing and you're getting your body to zero in and focus, to restore the overall body.
It's a strategic combination of ingredients that will help restore your gut, but help your body reduce inflammation and function better in conjunction with its siblings. Remove the bad stuff, put amazing stuff in, and let your body handle the rest. Because we're made to be amazing. We just haven't unlocked the potential until now.
Hi, I'm Mama His Glory. I'm not very technical, and I found a way to get to the programs and Bible studies so much easier by using our His Glory app. You can click on programs, you can click on Bible studies, and it's all right there at your fingertips. It's just a really great app, so I would highly recommend it to seniors, but not only seniors, to everyone.
President Trump has a bold new vision to help secure America's future through the power of cryptocurrency. Partnering with pioneers like Elon Musk, he's turning crypto into the next frontier of financial freedom. But how can you advance your retirement in this digital age? Introducing Block Trust IRA, the world's first AI-driven platform designed to help your cryptocurrency investments thrive. Thousands of retirees nationwide are already securing their futures with Block Trust IRA and receive up to $2,500 in funding bonuses. The experts in accelerating wealth retirement.
And we're back with our roundtable, biblical times we live in, with the Constitution and what's happening in the world. As Israel is striking Iran, we have this June 14th outpouring. We do know that there's terror cells in every top 40 cities, so we have to be extremely aware of this. I have really good connections to many generals, and we support our military 100%, and they're going to have to get involved. Derek, I'm going to take it back to you.
Well, my thing is this, when I sprung on the scene, as they call it, like I was retired military in a living normal world, Billboard hits, country music, didn't do any of this for that. I went viral. So if I was going to make a video go viral, it would have been in country music. It wouldn't have been doing what I've been tasked to do now. All right. And so special operations, and this is where you separate the wheat from the chaff from your normal veterans and special operations. All right. And Marine Corps understand this as well. That's why most people support me, veterans, or Marine Corps, and also special operations. All right. The foundation, first off. All right. Army, my branch, June 14th, 1775 was established first. June 30th, 1775 came the War Articles, your first military law. Military law was established long before the Declaration and long before the Articles of Confederation and long before the Constitution. All right. That militia that the Constitution talks about. All right. So there's that. All right. There's also another clause in the Constitution that's been forgotten about. Article 1, Section 9, Clause 2, the suspension clause, which says in an invasion and rebellion that the Constitution can be suspended. All right. That's where Eisenhower comes in with the Presidential Emergency Action Documents and also the continuity of government. JFK followed up with a long article, which is in our Special Operations 2023 publication, for guerrilla warfare, because that's where we were headed because of all the modern technology. That's why Eisenhower had the military-industrial complex speech. He didn't like where the military was going because of money. President Trump first, straight out the gate, started hammering defense contracts and lobbyists, and then all your three-letter agencies, and he made sure to tell everybody that it wasn't the three-letter agency itself. It was a senior-level leadership, so it wasn't everybody in there. All right, so there's that. What you're witnessing is a counter-psyop. Yes, there are a lot of laws that shouldn't be on laws. There are a lot of them. I'm not a law and order guy simply because it's a law and order. All right. But it's a counter-psychological operation because of what they have pumped into society, that we're a democracy. We're not a democracy. Article 4, Section 4, we're a republic. You said that. But you got to know the special operations. And because they put this in there, the people out there, you don't want to have a rebellion. So what President Trump and them have done is intercepted all of their corporation laws, 28 U.S. Code 3002, which says we're a federal corporation. They've intercepted that, and they're running a counter-psyop on everything. They intercepted all of their plans, and we're running a counter-psyop. Okay, 1973 is when Congress tried to put limits on the president with the national emergencies. All right, so what President Trump has done, they did do this. It's already there. All right, in the Title 50, Chapter 33, Section 1550, it says in the first 180 days after December the 20th, 2019, and every 180 days thereafter, the president's to report to Congress the use of military. All right, President Trump, that's when he invoked everything he invoked: continuity of government, the Federal Mission Resilience Strategy, which is that's what that is. Also, he federalized 1 million reserve components. Now, here's how you prove Article 1, Section 1. You have way back March 27th, that's when he federalized the reserves. March 23rd, all the articles were reading that President Trump is to install a general. You don't install a general. They're already there by rank. So they were telling you there was something coming. He told you there was a storm coming. Well, January the 20th, this is what proves it all. January the 20th, 2021, the whole world. So when you say Biden in present tense, that misleads people because it is a special operation. It sounds far-fetched at first. But on January the 20th, 2021, when everybody thought that Joe Biden was being inaugurated, no way, Jose. Military regulations, straight out the gate. First things first, he raised his right hand at 11:47 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, which is a violation of the Constitution, the 20th Amendment of that. He raised his right hand. He should have been at 12:01 to 12:05 like every other president. So there was that. Also, the National Guard did not salute the motorcade not one time. We will always salute a moving flag and a commander-in-chief. That did not happen nowhere all day. It was also the first time in U.S. history that two separate sets of cannons were shown on Inauguration Day. 3 for quote-unquote Joe, then also 4 at Joint Base Andrews with President Trump. First time in history, 2 different sets of cannons. Army Regulations 600-25 says there's to be a commissioned officer at every cannon salute. There was not a commissioned officer with the cannons for quote-unquote Joe. The first time in U.S. history they've ever shown, and it confused people because most people don't know this, and this was perfect for the plan, all right? But 3 cannons at Arlington is a funeral service. It's not a 21-gun salute by definition. Arlington National Cemetery, Doc Mill even tells people the 21-gun salute is not to be confused with the 3-volley salute seen or heard at Arlington. It's a funeral service. The 4 cannons, which is a 21-gun salute by definition, I'm an artillery guy, but they're actually mortar men who do the salutes for the presidents and also all the other generals and people who die. They're mortar men. This is all they do year round. They didn't get this wrong. There were 4 cannons, which is a 21-gun salute by definition, at Joint Base Andrews with President Trump. You're watching a military occupation, and it's all been done lawfully. It has been done lawfully. The military comes first, all right, in this nation, all right, and they suspended the Constitution. It's already there. The continuity government executive order proves that. And so when you say there's not an invasion, President Trump says all the time, we've been invaded. We've been invaded. We've been invaded. That's the very thing he tells the people. And the people out there, the normal people, don't even hear that. They don't hear the military portion, which they should hear. This is the very thing we're trying to get people to understand. It's like, hey, look, this is the greatest operation known to man, biblical, monumental, historical. He's overtaken. He's also mentioned, he gave, what's his name? I'm forgetting his name right now, John Bolton. He gave him a nickname. John Bolton's on CNN last year. He's on CNN. What did he say? He said, Well, the Constitution specifically bars the president from having a third term, but knowing President Trump, he'll seek to ratify the Constitution. All right. Nowhere in the Constitution did it give any of our founder, anybody, the power and authority to change the term limits. All right. So there's that. We can argue that all day long. It only says 4 years in a term. Now, here's how you prove your military. All right. Right now, the National Guard in New York State, March the 11th, 2025, the New York State, they wrote President Trump a letter asking him to federalize the National Guard active duty. There's no federalization order in place. There's none from March the 11th to this day. There's not an order in place from that date to June the 13th. Where's that order at? How come there were 2,800 National Guard in subway duty and prison duties in 2022 and 2023 and 2024? And the Adjutant General is reporting that, hey, here's our reports. We have National Guard on federalization duty. All right, where's that order? The only order in place is Executive Order 13912 from President Trump when he federalized 1 million reserve components. Title 10, every one of us veterans here raised our right hand at Title 10, Section 502. You can't have one Title 10 without the other. The only order in place. Then they increased it to 8,200 National Guard. The only order in place is from March 27th, 2020. Also, really quick, Joseph, and this is my last point. Sorry to take your time. But in Texas, 2024, if President Trump was a former president, this would have been a breach of national security and also a violation of his own executive order with the National Emergency 13848, which is election interference of a quote-unquote sitting president. He was the only person seen in Texas with the governor of Texas and the Adjutant General. The Adjutant General is the one that gives it away, though. The Adjutant General reports to the governor unless the National Guard are federalized by Title 10. What is a former president doing down there telling the whole world that this is a war going on? This is a war. You're seeing a military operation. He said military operation twice. That is not a state operation, not the border, because you have Arizona, you have New Mexico, you have other borders. That is a federalization order. President Trump was with the governor of Texas and the adjutant. And the same day they showed quote unquote Joe in Brownsville, Texas. And to this day, which anybody who knows codification, like the specialist on the back of the screen here, you can go in and change a website like that. Why does it say the 47th president, Joe Biden, visited Brownsville, Texas? And Brownsville's never been the topic. It's been Del Rio and Eagle Pass. That's always been the setup. Why was President Trump there? Why was he the only president at the border? So it's a military occupation. The Constitution's been suspended, continuity of government. And why would Joe continue 8 executive orders by President Trump with national emergencies when they automatically terminate in 2 years if they're not continued? You need a pen, paper president to continue an executive order. Those executive orders being enforced right now are deporting all the illegal migrants. They are taking back the Panama Canal. Why would Joe Biden continue those executive orders? It's all a military operation, and it is all lawfully. And President Trump has told everybody it's an invasion. So saying it's not an invasion is going against the very grain of what President Trump is actually telling people, because that is his proclamation and it's timestamped to exonerate him. When he gets through with all this, he's got to be exonerated. Not by me. I don't need him exonerated. He needs to be exonerated by all these liberals and people out there holding up severed heads and saying this is all a king and he's a tyrant, he's a dictator. No, it's not. It's all military law first. It's already been done. It's already been validated. All this talk about Biden, this is surface level talk that we need to leave in the past. That's the rhino kind of talk. That's the swamp kind of talk. We need to educate people on the Constitution, yes, but we need to educate them on military law. We need to educate them on when the military can operate, not being a tyrant, not being a military coup, nothing like that. That's exactly what's going on. It's special operations. It's all unconventional warfare. It's already been proven. And it's doing an injustice to special operators out there active right now. Not all the ones that are behind the scenes and whatnot, all of us that are going on all these podcasts, but it's doing an injustice. It's already been done.
Yeah, it's President Trump has been using. He's very clever in his tweets and his retweets and all that. He's using the term insurrection. Now you have the Joe Biden auto pen. So what you're talking about, Derek, is setting up for something big. He's going to show us. He's not letting 2020 go. We're going to see the truth come out of there. And I can't go in any more depth on Derek.
45-47.
Yeah.
45-47. The dash matters.
I have military people that are very high up that will support what you're talking about 100%. All right. Before we go to that, let's go to Joe and talk about what we've been talking about as far as the federal corporation. The Fed is not federal nor reserved, and how the IRS is unconstitutional. And then we can kind of wrap it back up with something I think we can all agree on. How do we handle this auto pen? Because I think this auto pen is going to tie into what Derek's referencing. All right, Joe.
Thank you, Pastor Dave, and thanks to your other guests, because I'm learning a lot about their expertise. Got a lot of research to do after the show. But anyway, maybe your listeners and audience are well aware, but the Federal Reserve Act and the income tax, our contemporary income tax, were both ushered in 1913. And that's not a coincidence. And I'm sure your audience is well aware about, the fractional reserve banking that we have, the fiat money, printing money out of thin air, and how, horrible that is for all of us. But then the income tax comes along, and the main reason that I resigned from the IRS is I didn't create anything on my own, but I basically poked at the evidence that was there to determine if the IRS was actually enforcing the income tax laws outside of the laws that were actually, passed by Congress and signed by a previous president. And in fact, the evidence is overwhelming that that's the case. The IRS is demanding income tax from, tens of millions of Americans, collecting trillions of dollars. And in many, many cases, the average American is not really required to file a federal income tax return and swear that they owe this income tax money, to the federal government. And as I mentioned earlier, I politely and professionally confronted my IRS supervisors with this evidence, just a small portion of the evidence, actually. And, I thought, okay, this is a bitter pill to be offering to my bosses at the IRS, but we all took that oath to support and defend the Constitution. And so, you have to swallow bitter pills if you've taken that oath, as my fellow guests are well aware. So, my issue currently, not my only issue, but that the American people, and I think President Trump and his appointees, they're under this impression that we need to change the laws in order to get rid of the income tax. And I think the evidence is overwhelming. And at agentfortruth.com, my website, people can check out the evidence for themselves that we don't need to change any laws. We just need the IRS to actually enforce the law as it's written. And in that case, the vast majority of Americans wouldn't be hammered by the IRS. They wouldn't have to deal with the IRS at all. You could still have an income tax, but it would only be applicable, as per the law, to non-resident aliens and foreign corporations, not the average American living and working in the United States. So I would ask people to just check the evidence out for yourself. You don't have to believe me. Check out the dozens of U.S. Supreme Court cases on the topic. And again, we don't need to wait for Congress to cooperate, which they never will. Let's get the word out to the American people, to Elon Musk, to, all the great talk show hosts like yourself, that, hey, we don't need to change any laws. We just need the IRS to obey the law. We need the American people to know what the law is in the first place. As both other guests have pointed out, it's really a good idea to do some study, little less football watching, little less time on the golf course. Take some homework to be a good American.
Exactly. We've been lied to about so many things, and this is part of the Great Awakening and what Derek is talking about with our military, invasion, insurrection. Derek, I want to ask about the Marines, and then we'll get away from the military, and then we'll go to, I think we need to spend some time off that subject and talk about the auto pen, because the auto pen constitutionally opens up a lot of things. If Joe Biden wasn't the person signing it, or Joe Biden didn't exist anyway, we know documents were signed that he didn't sign. Before we do, I'm curious, Derek, why the Marines? Tell me why the Marines are important to what President Trump's doing. I'm a Marine, so I had to ask that question.
Yeah, you would do that to an Army guy. That's yeah. Well, your Marine Corps, I always say, let loose the dogs of war, the devil dogs. You are the most trained and skilled at every aspect of land, water, sky, and then also the president's own. You all pride yourself on that, and you should. I always tell people, and I've said this from the get-go, if we really wanted to do a military coup in another kind of fashion, all you'd have to do is take the Marine Corps and put them in every city and let them loose on all these people who want to riot. That's not a protest, and it would clean up really fast. You could probably attest to this, especially, and I'm not going to talk about your age here, but even the young Marine Corps now, 12 out of your 14 weeks are combatives weekly. And y'all are real skilled with knocking each other upside the head. So, it's like when all these law enforcement are saying, if you spit on us, we're going to hit you. You don't want to be hit by a Marine Corps. I can tell you right now, I have a buddy from Texas as well, Marine Corps, and this I won't say his name just for the fact, but someone upset him one time. We were down in Austin, Texas, and someone upset him, and he didn't take it out on them. He went around back, and if you've ever been to Austin, Texas, they have these cement pillars, and they're bolted to the ground, literally bolted in cement on cement, or whatever the little rocks are. He took that thing and unbolted it. That's how strong the Marine Corps are. So, Marine Corps, the president's choice, and again, you shouldn't want regular military in the streets. No, that's exactly what Joint Publication 3-57 is, civil and military operations. You shouldn't want that unless the Constitution and or Congress deem so. And that's what's been deemed in the wartime orders that President Trump's invoked. And what better choice than, what's cool about it at first was using the corporation against them. And this is what's really cool. At first, he said, okay, I'll use your own limitations on me, and we'll use our reserve components, which are federal only, and then National Guard when we need them. So you're seeing the National Guard now, and then the Marine Corps, so the regular military. And in that Title 50, Chapter 33, that 1550, it says specifically regular or irregular forces. Where your irregular are all your special operations. That's your unconventional warfare. That's your covert operations. That's your clandestine operations. You won't know about them until we want you to know about them. The regular forces, that comes in there. So your Marine Corps is always going to be your first choice. They're always going to be the first in. Outside of your special operators, the Marine Corps are the first in, always. So it's like setting the tone. It's kind of like anybody who's played sports out there. If you've never been in the military, some of you played sports. A lot of coaches like Nick Saban and some of these other guys, Belichick, they always said set the tone early. So the first kickoff, if you get a penalty, I won't be mad because we can make up for it. But you set the tone and you knock some people in the dirt, and then you set that tone and new precedent. And that's what they're doing right now. They got to set a new tone and precedent saying, hey, from here out, here's what's going to happen. You burn a flag, you get a year in jail. So if you're just getting a year in jail for burning a flag, just think what you're going to get for throwing rocks at police and law enforcement and sheriff, et cetera. Think about the escalation. You're seeing the new sheriff in town saying, hey, the laws, that's correct. I'm not a law and order guy because it's laws and orders. I'm a law and order guy because they need to be enforced. And that's what you're seeing. But the enforcement also has to come with what? Punishment. And what are the consequences and the repercussions of your choice to quote unquote riot, which is not a protest. So they send in the Marine Corps to do the man's job, as the saying is. So, and that's what you're seeing.
Yeah, Marines, they started training just a little bit after I got out. I did a little bit of combat training in Camp Pendleton in cities, and that's what they're called to do right now. We know Tom Homan just said this week there's at least 2 million illegal immigrants in the United States of America that are terrorists. Hezbollah, Hamas, that are sworn to kill us. There is an invasion of a foreign force waiting for the call from Iran to hit it. Israeli generals have been on His Glory talking about it. American generals are talking about it. We're here. And that's why I believe strongly the Marines are going to be right there because they're going to stop this and save this country. All right. So that's going to be all on the military. And again, we pray going into tomorrow that peace prevails because we do not want this country turned upside down. But if it does, rest assured the Marines will do what it needs to be done. I want to talk about the auto pen, though, in the last 6 minutes we have from a constitutional perspective. What happens if what President Trump is saying, and now we're getting evidence, that Biden, this auto pen, signed all these documents. How do we handle that from a constitutional perspective? You want to touch on that first, Chris Ann?
Well, I think that we should stay focused on what the real problem is and not what the symptom of the problem is. Obviously, we live in a digital age, and there are going to be documents that will be digitally signed. We digitally sign legal documents all the time. So a digital signature is not the problem, obviously. The problem is who's running the country. And what we have to look at are the checks and balances that are in place. Quite realistically, the president signing documents would not be as big of a problem as it is if we limited presidential power to what Article 2 of the Constitution specifically delegates to the president. James Madison said, and Alexander Hamilton both said, if it's not enumerated and delegated in the Constitution, it is an unjust authority. It's an unlawful authority. So part of the problem is that we have over these many years, and this is not about Donald Trump, it's not even about Joe Biden, because this started a long time ago. We have expanded the presidential authority unconstitutionally beyond the Constitutional's delegation. So the real problem that we have in America is not sticking to the Constitution and its specific limited government authority. Now, it was asserted that the Constitution's been set aside. Unfortunately, Article 1, Section 9, Clause 2 doesn't say you can set aside the Constitution. It says the privilege of writ of habeas corpus can be suspended in the case of rebellion or invasion. That's not the Constitution as a whole. So the question is, who's signing the documents and why? The solution has to be employing, number one, the limitations of the Constitution on the powers of the president, and number two, the check and balance of the Congress. I mean, this is something that we have been trained to ignore. The fact that Congress abdicating and delegating its authority to the executive branch unconstitutionally is a way to trick the people to not hold Congress accountable for what they're really supposed to be doing. And so the checks and balances internally are how we're supposed to govern and actually keep control of the limited and defined authority. But you see, we have what our founders classified as a compound republic. We are not just a simple federal government rules everything where checks and balances internally are our limits. Our compound republic is that the states themselves were designed to be an essential check and balance on federal power. So you were right to actually talk about how we need our governors to do things. We need our governors to get involved. The National Guard should have always been left with the state militias, so the governors could be the commanders in chief over their state militias.
All right, Chris Ann, we got about 2 minutes. I hate to interrupt you, but we only have about 2 minutes left. I want to make sure Joe and Derek get the last call.
No.
Joe,
right.
Again, 2 minutes left, both Joe and Derek to finish off. AutoPen, constitutionally, if he didn't sign it, what does that do? Does that undo everything? Go ahead, Joe.
To me, it does. I mean, look how but I'd like the American public to realize how they want the American people to sign on a tax return, swearing that they owe all this money, and they swear to whether they use Bitcoin and all these things. And yet these federal government officials just flout regulations, statutes, laws, the Constitution that they took an oath to support and defend. So I just like the American people to get a little more angry and upset that there's a double standard going on here. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Joe. We're going to tie to Derek.
Amen.
You know, this AutoPen ties into what you were talking about. The guy's not there.
45-47. The pen has nothing to do with anything. History's going to unveil that Donald John Trump, and I hate calling him that, but President Donald John Trump is a wartime president, supreme commander, just like Eisenhower. That's why he quotes him all the time, because he used the same tactics. They shouldn't ever put it in law if they didn't want it to be used. That's all you'd have to do if this was real time, is tell all the Democrats and liberals, if you didn't want this to be done and enforced, then they should have abolished this. They should have never left this on the paper. They never dreamt that good guys would get in and infiltrate them and take over this nation lawfully and do it lawfully using the Constitution. But the Declaration gives us our rights, not the Constitution. We the people are the government. All right, the Constitution is important until what? Destructive of these ends. But when a long train of abuses, the dash holds all your answers. This has already been done, and it's setting the stage for President Trump to unveil the most biblical, historical, monumental operation.
Well, I know biblical times are coming, and his glory is going to go from east to west to north to south. God has it, and light wins. Thank you to our panel.